Hello, Rare Elvis Photos. You know what? So many people have been asking me to read more of Elvis and Kathy, and especially Nancy, who's in a lot of pain right now, and says that reading helps distract her from the pain and makes the pain less. That I'm going to read some more Elvis and Kathy. Before I do, though, just for a quick 5-10 seconds, this little room I'm in right now, which is near the beach, has a cool little side table, and wouldn't you know it, it says, "Follow that dream." So this must be the place that we were supposed to rent when we came down to the beach because of that. So the last time we went through this book, we read Kathy and Elvis's first time, a big fight. And we read a section that I'm going to reread and go over again and then continue reading from there because, you know, I can see all the statistics from the videos, and it looks like an average of 10 minutes of this video was viewed, which means that a lot of people didn't get to this section. So if you were one of the ones, guess what? You're going to get to watch this section and read along, and then we'll move on forward with more of Kathy and Elvis's relationship. But it says right here that Elvis loved animals, and he missed his pets. He had to leave behind a Graceland. So he got himself a pet chimpanzee. I'm sitting on this daybed doing some reading here. Let me make sure. Pet chimpanzee. Okay. Pet chimpanzee that he named Scatter. And this is an important story because this is probably really what truly happened. There's a lot of ideas. You know, if some of y'all didn't know that Elvis had a chimp, he had a chimp. And, well, actually, we'll talk about that when the story's done. All right, so without further ado, here we go. Elvis loved animals, and he missed his pets that he had to leave behind at Graceland. So he got himself a pet chimpanzee. All right, let's get this book set up right. And he named Scatter. "I love Scatter. He was so affectionate and so smart," Elvis told me. "I could see his eyes light up with a memory. I used to dress him up in a tux, send my limo after him, and bring him to the studios. I loved seeing him in that limo, all dressed up, holding a cigar. Now, that cigar was never lit, but it did add a lot to the role that Scatter was playing, and I think he knew it. Well, Scatter was one of my best buddies I had around at the time. He would hug me, and we would have long conversations about this and that. Scatter seemed to understand what I said to him," Elvis recalled with a smile. "But one day Scatter got a little frisky," Elvis said, "and somebody at the house left the door ajar. So Scatter, he was a curious guy, so he decided to take a walk. Next door there was a lot of laughter and people talking, and Elvis knew he had stumbled onto a party, and he loved parties, obviously. So he decided to go. The front door of the neighbor's house must have been unlocked because Scatter just walked right in. The hostess was pregnant at the time and might account for her reaction. But all these Beverly Hills types were sitting around the dining room table having dinner. All of a sudden, Scatter decided to join them and jumped right up on a chandelier and started swinging back and forth. The hostess nearly fainted from fright, and the guests started screaming and scared poor Scatter half to death. But by this time, he was missed at home, and one of the bodyguards came to his rescue." "Oh, that's hilarious," I laughed, loving the way Elvis was telling the story. "Then what happened?" "Well, then it kind of got serious. The folks filed a lawsuit. And besides, they complained to the city of Beverly Hills, which is really stuffy about animals. And before you know it, the city told me Scatter had to go." "Oh no, how could they do that? I'd been an animal lover all my life, and by that time I was seething at the entire city of Beverly Hills. I didn't know what to do. I loved that little fella so much, but I had no choice, and I shipped him off to Graceland, where I knew everyone would make sure that he was taken care of," Elvis said sadly. "Well, at least you had a place to send him. You didn't have to give him away to strangers." "I would never have said a word if I had known the outcome of the story." Scatter didn't seem to see it that way. "They always told me chimps really love somebody forever, and I guess it's true." Scatter refused to eat, just sat around and mourned because he missed me so much. And then Daddy called me from Graceland and told me Scatter had just died of a broken heart. Well, there were tears in Elvis's eyes. "That's awful and so sad," was all I could think to say. "So I just moved out of Beverly Hills, sold the house, and never went back. And I made sure everybody knew what I thought of that place." Elvis struck back the only way he knew how, but his voice told me he still felt the pain of losing Scatter. That story endeared him to me more than ever. Now, Elvis was especially excited about a speech he had made to the National Jaycee Convention in Memphis, where he had been named one of the country's 10 most outstanding young men. He stood on a footstool and with gestures repeated his speech, and I won't forget the song he quoted in closing. Without a song, the day would never end. Without a song, the road would never bend. Without a song, a man ain't got a friend. Without a song. Then he finished his speech by saying, so I'll just keep on singing a song. He was so proud of being named by the Jaycees, and he had picked up several programs which he gave out to special friends. I still have mine. By that night, in the quiet stillness of each other's arms after a flurry of passion, things began to go topsy-turvy. I think of the words we said to one another, and to this day I still regret what happened. Looking back, I can see that the whole idea of being in love with a married man affected me more deeply than I had imagined. I would be ecstatic when he helped me, responsive to his lovemaking, and totally, madly, wildly in love. And then I would go into a deep depression, feeling guilty, sinful, unworthy, and suffering inwardly because I could not find any valid excuse for committing adultery, love or no love. My moods would swing up and down, back and forth. Elvis took the brunt of all my pent-up feelings this night. And out of nowhere I said, we have to stop all this because I can't stand myself anymore. I really can't excuse my behavior. Having sex with a married man when I know it isn't going anywhere and it doesn't mean as much to you as it does to me. Elvis was surprised at my sudden pronouncement. Sweetheart, what is this? I'm through. No more. It's over, I said, bouncing out of bed, and I began to pace back and forth. Does that mean I have to get someone else to train them just like I want them? What did you say? I can't believe my ears. Am I some kind of dog or puppy or pet that you have to housebreak, train to be a good pet? I'm a woman and a human being, and I hate you for saying that to me. You will just have to find yourself another Gladys. Elvis had never seen me so angry. I don't think I had been so angry and upset in my life. I kept raving and ranting. He sat up in bed, legs crossed, lips tight with silent anger, and stared straight ahead. He sat up in bed, legs crossed, lips tight, and silent anger, and stared straight ahead. Suddenly, when I had quieted down, he said in a hurt voice, almost a whisper, my mother's name was Gladys. Now, that's an important little section there. I know we read this in that last video, so if you've gotten through this section, I'm sorry. We'll read more past where I ended up yesterday. But for those that didn't get the chance to see this video because you didn't watch enough of it, it's important, or didn't even watch yesterday's video, the fact that he actually let her rant and rave until she was done. It's pretty dang respectful. If you know, because a lot of times people get in fights and they interrupt each other. So I really like kind of seeing that side of Elvis, and that Kathy told that part of that story. And if you didn't really catch that yesterday, that's important to kind of understand about maybe the dynamic of Elvis as well as his understanding of Kathy. Oh, Elvis, I didn't know. I've always been used to that name when I make a point. Like, get another Gladys. Believe me, it had nothing to do with your mother. He sat up in bed, studying my face for a long, silent period, trying to figure out if I was telling the truth. Elvis loved his mother, but he had never referred to her by name before, or if he had, I had forgotten. However, I knew that I had touched something raw and painful. I was sick about the way I'd hurt him. I really didn't know about your mother's name. I never would have said that if I'd have known. And it's important that you believe me, but you hurt me so much too, saying you were training me like some dumb animal just to give you pleasure. Before we move on from that part too, it's important that some folks commented yesterday that she had to have known that Gladys was Elvis's mom's name. But remember early in the story, she said she wasn't an Elvis fan at all. And of course, we've seen videos, documentaries, movies. We've studied Elvis because there was so much more about Elvis and the detailed personal lives after he passed away than while he was still alive. So she'd never seen a documentary, and maybe she did not know the actual name. She knew that Elvis loved his mom. But anyways, Elvis got up and pulled me to him. Sweetheart, I didn't mean it like it sounded. It's hard for me to find someone who can get used to the way I live. My routine, please don't act this way. After a long while, I was appeased, and we apologized to one another over and over. But after that argument, there was just a slight difference in Elvis's attitude. I couldn't define it, but it was there. I wanted to bite my tongue off for being so emotional. After all, I walked into our relationship with my eyes wide open. Elvis never hid anything from me. I knew he was married. He had told me often enough what he thought of marriage. and he had even told me several times that he could not be faithful to one woman. So what was wrong with me? Why couldn't I just accept him the way he was, not try to change him because he couldn't be changed? And I knew that. Why the frustration? But, like it or not, we had both crossed some invisible but forbidden boundary, entered a land that was strange to me. On the surface, everything seemed to be the same. Elvis sang, I sang, we talked, we laughed, took swims, drove with the guys in the dune buggies, but there was tension that hadn't been present before. Nothing I could put my finger on, like flickering shadows in the night. It was as if both of us were in mourning, but we didn't know who had died. I was sad when I left Palm Springs that next day. Elvis pretended it was just like always, but I knew I had stepped on some sacred ground, that I had behaved impulsively, and he didn't like my attitude, especially since he had been honest with me from the beginning. I went back to work feeling low. I had 5 more shows to do with Bobby Darin, and I had to get through them somehow. But Tom Diskin called and said we were going to go on tour, which would begin in Oakland, move to Portland, Oregon, Seattle, San Francisco, one day in LA, San Diego, and end up in Oklahoma City. And then we would be back home by Thanksgiving. So I canceled out on Bobby Darin and I left on the tour with Elvis. It was not a very nice thing to do to my contractor, but when you're in love, you do some very unthoughtful things to some very nice people. For some reason, it felt really good to be on the road again this time. I love walking into a different city each day. I loved waking up in a different city each day. And I was crazy about flying then. On this flight, we used Conrad Hilton's personal plane, a G2 jet, which seemed to take off more like a rocket than a plane, and Elvis just loved it. He kept talking about the plane and how he relished going at great speeds. We were sitting together in the back of this G2, and I can still see Elvis in his black cape, leaning back in his seat during takeoff and making faces as if he could feel the racing wind on his face. It was really comical to watch him. Now, Elvis had a new look on this trip. He traveled with a cape and a cane. I remember one cane because it was so beautiful. It had a lion's head that served as the cane handle, and the lion was made of gold with precious stones. I don't know if he had designed it or found it somewhere, but it was smashing. Touring by plane just seemed to add to the excitement of going to different places. It seemed that I thrived on the road tours these days. Don't ask me why, because when you do one-night shows and move from city to city, and you have no idea where you are most of the time, you see Oakland looks like Portland, and Portland looks like Glendale. It's all the same, yet different. The Elvis audiences were just as rambunctious as ever, and the screaming fans were just as loud. But this time it wasn't such a shock. Maybe I'm getting used to being crazy. Another memory that stands out for me on the way to Portland was when we both saw a double rainbow. Elvis and I just held hands and watched those brilliant colors, and knew just seeing such a spectacular sight meant that we were destined for good luck. I think that's what it says. Let's apologize. Let me focus on that beautiful little blessed pillow that is in this room, because we are all blessed right now. At least I hope we all are. Yep, that's right. After Portland, we went on to Seattle, and Elvis was in an exuberant mood. I recalled him standing up in the plane to get everyone's attention. He had a paper in his hand. Look, everybody, my record sales have just hit a total of 300 million. The Beatles have sold 60 million records. At this writing, Elvis records have sold more than 2 billion copies. No one will ever catch up to me now. We all rejoiced at the news. After Seattle, we headed for beautiful, romantic San Francisco. But that trip to San Francisco will always remain in my memory, like a hot brand searing into my brain and my heart. The trip had been fun, romantic, and never predictable, because working with Elvis brought fresh excitement every day and for every performance. I stayed with Elvis in his suite each night, but I always had a room assigned to me, which was nice because I felt that I always had a place to be alone if I wanted to be. However, it was an extravagance because I seldom, if ever, used that room. We were in the hotel, and I was fascinated with the view of the most romantic city in the world, and I was anxious for the show to be over so I could be alone with Elvis. Loving him and being with him every day and every night had been the greatest experience of my life, and I wanted to talk to him about how much it had meant to me. Then, just before the show, Elvis pulled me to him and then held my face so he's looking right in my eyes. It's time, Minnie Mouse. It's time, was all that he said. But it was the way he looked at me told me that it was serious. Time for what? I didn't get his meaning. Time for you to go to your own room, baby. With that, he let go of me and turned away. Why? Why? I heard myself saying. But there was nobody around to give me an answer. I was stunned. If Elvis didn't want me with him that night, and there was no relative or Priscilla that was in town, then there could be only one answer. Another woman. That has to be why he wants me to go to my own room. I just know what I said to myself, and of course it was true. So, we're just going to pause for a second there. Ouch. Ouch. That had to hurt. Especially because, she's working with Elvis. Now, to Elvis's defense, if he needs any defense in this, she told him that she couldn't do it anymore. She said that it made her feel horrible, full of guilt. I don't know whether they actually slept with each other after that. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But she made it really clear that she couldn't handle the situation. So I'm curious. I'm just as curious as y'all are to see where this is going. So let's just continue. How can I describe the hurt? I had difficulty breathing or even swallowing. I wanted to run away, but my feet were glued to the floor. I couldn't move. Then there were flashes of anger and hate that racked my body in hot waves. What did I do? What did I say? Why can't I be enough for him? How have I failed him? I began pacing back and forth, hardly aware of what I was doing or where I was. Then I started blaming myself. Palm Springs. Remember the fight you had with him because he made that remark about having to train someone else? Well, first off, he made that remark, to Elvis's defense because Kathy said that she couldn't do it anymore. They had to stop it. Okay, so how angry you were and saying that he should get into Gladys, how hurt he looked, how different he was the next morning, a subtle difference. But it was there, and it was my fault. Elvis hated possessiveness. He had to feel free. Was he training someone else now? Whose heart is he breaking now? What girl is he laughing with, kissing? Is she tall, blonde, beautiful? How can I compete with the endless parade of beauty queens that throw themselves at his feet? Oh God, I can't stand the pain. I wonder, like you guys are wondering right now, who this is. Is it Linda Thompson? Is it somebody else? Who do you think? Go ahead and go to the comments right now and leave a comment if you're watching this, because you can still continue watching the video. And take a guess on who he was with, because there's a bevy of beauties that he was with somewhere around this time frame, and I think most of them were blonde, or there was a lot that were blonde. Not all of them. All right, so let's continue. All right, let's continue again. This was the night I never wanted to remember again. This was the night that my entire world changed and my dreams turned sour and ugly. This was the night I saw another side of Elvis that I thought I would never be able to accept. I didn't think I'd be able to go on tour anymore. There was Los Angeles coming up, then San Diego, and then Oklahoma City. How could I be on stage with them, singing and moving with the music? How could I be civil to him, even perform when I felt choked with hurt and resentment? Well, we do a lot of things we don't think we can do, and show business is a great mender of broken hearts because there's no choice. You do go on. You do sing. You do pack, you move, you pack, you move, and you always do perform. You do all of that even if you're ill or in a bad mood, and you do that even when the man you love has found somebody else. Well, we're not going to stop there. We're going to keep reading. For those of you that have just joined watching this video series, know that you can go back and click on Rare Elvis Photos below the video. Go to your podcast, Elvis and Kathy, and you can start reading from the beginning. We're on page 74 right now. All right. From San Francisco, it was on to Los Angeles and the Forum, where the crowds got out of hand. What I remember most about this appearance is that we did 2 shows, and each one had a sellout crowd of 20,000. And there had only been 10 minutes of radio time advertising the events. That's when Elvis said, when I decided on doing road tours, it was because I was tired of making movies, and I wanted to work in front of a live audience again. I thought at the time the tours would end up costing me money, but I wanted to do them anyways. That day, we did a matinee and then an evening performance. And I think that was Parker probably that said, you're going to lose money if you do this, Elvis, to try to keep him in the movies, to keep making that guaranteed money. As we were leaving for our hotel on a bus, a group, which seemed like thousands to those of us inside, began rocking the bus back and forth like it was a toy. When the police finally broke it up, it was a harrowing experience. We really thought that they were going to tip it over, and we didn't know if we should get off the bus and take our chances with that wild crowd or stay aboard and possibly be injured if the bus went on its side. I shudder to think what might have happened if the police hadn't arrived when they did. By the time we left Los Angeles, I had recovered from my initial shock, just enough to put the entire San Francisco nightmare into some kind of perspective. When Elvis told me it was time to go to my own room, I was numb with grief, and I couldn't justify his behavior or mine either for that matter. However, I decided that since we had to be back together and work together on this tour, I was going to make the most of it and just wait until I got home to sort out all of my confused feelings and thoughts. But I knew there had been some permanent damage to our relationship. I just didn't know how permanent or even what either one of us wanted to do to salvage from that experience. So when we got to San Diego, Elvis wanted me to sleep in his room that night. And I did. But there was a difference. An invisible curtain that hadn't been there before. Perhaps it was my invisible curtain, and I was the only one aware of it, but at least I didn't feel quite so vulnerable and helpless. However, when I allowed myself to think about it, the enormity of my pain would engulf me in great waves, as if I were drowning in an ocean of helpless despair. So, we're gonna go on with the story and read more. But so, it happened in San Francisco. They went on to LA, played the shows at the Forum. There was only 2 shows there. Then they went to San Diego, and Kathy was back in Elvis's bed. That's just, 2 nights, 3 nights? So, I'm curious to see who you put in the comments, because she has not said who it was that Elvis had with her. She probably will later on. But either somebody got flown in, or maybe nobody. Maybe Elvis was just hung out with his buddies. Maybe Larry Geller was hanging out with them and slept on the other side of the bed, or somebody else. Charlie Hodge. All right, so Elvis was in an exuberant mood in San Diego, singing "It's Now or Never," beautiful song, in the shower and feeling very playful. Soon he glided effortlessly into beautiful Italian lyrics. After he dried off and walked back into the bedroom, I told him, "I was very impressed with your vocals." I wonder if very impressed with your vocal range when you first came out with that record. He smiled and said, "You know how that song came about? One time I was in the service. I was singing O Solo Mio. And I turned to my guys and said," and he gestured with his hand pointing up in the air, "Tell them to write new lyrics to that song in English. Even though we were having a wonderful time in San Diego, by the time the second afternoon, I felt the need to go to my own room. I think I needed to be alone to try and think through things and sort out my feelings. He understood, and the next day I was in better spirits as I joined him on his plane, and we headed for the next stop, Oklahoma. In Oklahoma City, Elvis's suite was dark. It was done in black and white, and it was really very stark looking. Even though the room was filled with flowers and fruit baskets, his usual hotel welcome, Elvis hated the decor, so he had an inspiration and turned to someone and said, "Go out and get all the red light bulbs for this place." When the red bulbs arrived, he had put them into every light fixture, including bed lamps, which gave the place a dark but warm feeling. He was pretty proud of this instant interior decorating. I've got to say here, and I'm sorry about my reading, because once again, I think maybe not sleeping in a new place and being on the beach and all that stuff. This red light bulb, who does that make you think of? The redesign of Graceland to red. Now, was it Linda Thompson, or was it Elvis, or was it both? Or was the girl that he told, well, and you wouldn't think that it was Linda Thompson, because she said she was with him for a year straight and Elvis was faithful. But was that girl that Elvis put Kathy in her own room for, was it Linda somehow? Anyways, Elvis's suite overlooked the auditorium entrance, and we sat in front of the picture window, watching the people lining up far below. Moving slowly towards the ticket window, Elvis was relaxing in an armchair. At least he was about as relaxed as he ever got, with all of his fingers jiggling, and one leg crossed over the other, foot wiggling nervously. He watched them for a while, then slowly observed out loud, "People will come from miles around just to see a freak," which made everyone laugh, but Elvis laughed louder than everyone else. There was Vernon, Elvis's father, Charlie, and myself relaxing and talking before the show. Somehow we got on the subject of our early church-going days. As a young child, I had visited the Nazarene church with some relatives, and Elvis was a member of the Assembly of God Church, and both churches encouraged testifying whenever the mood struck a believer. I told him how frightened I was as a young child, singing in front of the church, and all these grown-up people waving handkerchiefs, jumping up and down, testifying about their sins, and asking for God's forgiveness. I mentioned one aunt who was slightly retarded. Well, that's not a word we say anymore, is it, folks? But slightly, and would jump up saying, I want to testify. But she would softly say, be good today, and sit down. It was touching and funny. Elvis said that testifying at his church had really terrified Priscilla. You know, she's Catholic, and they're reserved. She's used to a much different atmosphere in her church. I respect that, he explained. But when she saw all that's going on, people jumping up and testifying and shouting, it really disturbed her, so she was never really comfortable in my church. I was talking about Priscilla in front of Kathy. Elvis had a special relationship with his grandma, who he called Dodger. Once, when he and the guys were staging one of their firecracker wars on the grounds of Graceland, he started throwing them at the house, aiming for Dodger's window. All in the spirit of fun, of course. She adored the prankster in Elvis, and I think she even inherited this rascal quality from her that he inherited, okay? Well, while in Oklahoma City, Elvis was lying on his bed, and suddenly he jumped up and started dialing the telephone. I gotta call my grandma, he said. After he was connected to Graceland and was talking to Dodger, he found out that she was ill. See, he said in his very best baby talk, don't I always know when to call my Dodger? Don't I always know when she's sick? His voice was so tender and so loving, it stirred me emotionally. But no matter how confused I was about our relationship and what was expected of me, I still enjoyed being around him and being with him. He was always so charged up, so unpredictable. He kept things moving and changing. Elvis was really a very exciting man. Then the tour was over, and I went back to Los Angeles. Elvis headed for Graceland, where he always tried to spend the holidays. It was a lonely Thanksgiving and Christmas. I had my family, and I was grateful to each and every one of them, but they never mentioned Elvis to me, and I didn't really want to discuss Elvis with them, so an important part of my life was closed off, and total loneliness set in. At one long recording session in Los Angeles, I had an extended wait, and out of desperation to get some of the heavy burden off my chest, I confided in a singer who was also a good friend. She listened seriously for a moment, and then her eyes lit up. Wow, she groaned. Kathy, if you were going to lose your virginity, I can't think of a better man to do it with. She couldn't get over how lucky I was. I know she didn't mean to do it, but she didn't take my dilemma as seriously as I did, and it was much too early in the romance to make light of what was a very heavy burden for me. Well, I was busy, but the days were like a jail sentence. In the past, I'd always looked forward to the holidays, Christmas, New Year's Eve, and the get-togethers, the long lunches, exchanging gifts, and church. But church seemed to be the only place where I felt peace. My other real consolation was working. During the season, I got a chance to sing in a good classical style vocally, did some oratorios, and special choral music like The Messiah. Music has always been my love, and singing some of the world's greatest sacred music helped me through some of the worst times. On the days when I wasn't working, I was restless, on edge, most of the time, and approached all the traditional things with a well-hidden, I hope, sense of boredom. Somehow, the days passed, and it was time to go to Las Vegas for rehearsals. This would be the first time I had ever rehearsed with Elvis. When I had walked into the show the previous August, it was already underway, so I simply adjusted the best as I could. I was looking forward to the rehearsal because I had heard that an Elvis Presley rehearsal was never dull. I was right. It wasn't. We had all gathered in the rehearsal room, and suddenly, Elvis appeared like a shining light on a gloomy day. Once again, I noted that Elvis never entered a room like most people. He swept in and took over as usual because his natural magnetism affected men and women alike. What started out to be an ordinary gathering turned into a real happening when Elvis appeared on the scene. First, he had the most beautiful cape made of suede with fringe in bright primary colors. It was so stunning that we all commented on it, and he was very proud. Priscilla designed it, then had it made for me, he beamed. Wonder how that's going to go. Talking about Priscilla. Elvis liked clothes. She didn't mention anything about that, about how it made her feel. Okay. Elvis liked his clothes, and he would really glow when everyone approved his taste. I must admit that on some men, such a wardrobe would look strange or out of place, but on Elvis, it was usually smashing and seemed just right for him. Entering rehearsal, he had that cat that ate the canary look, and I knew something was up. He was followed by bodyguards who were carrying oversized briefcases filled with silver dollars. He walked up to me and dumped some of them in my lap. I was flabbergasted and not sure what to say. Then he started giving them to 10 or 12 people in the room. He was so pleased that he had surprised us, and he started joking, and then for no reason, we all began throwing the silver dollars at one another, and the room became a mass of flying silver dollars coming from every direction. That's dangerous. Take an eye out right there. Right after that, a new game started when we were all scrambled around on our hands and knees trying to retrieve the money, competing with one another as to how many we could collect. To top off this strange beginning to a rehearsal, Elvis gave each of the girls, the Sweets and myself, a gold evening bag filled with more Eisenhower silver dollars. That's very sweet. Inside my bag, he had written with a felt pen, "I love you, darling, EP." What excitement! But there was no one there as excited and as pleased as Elvis. It was quite a momentous occasion for the beginning of a new Las Vegas show, and I'm certain that none of us will ever forget. Okay, I'm going to go back to that, but I want to just take a look. I wonder if she has any pictures of that bag in here that we can see. Be nice to see that. I know there's pictures. Here we go. I looked at some of these pictures the other day with y'all. So we're on page 80. Lottie, Elvis's maid, and me having a reunion in Graceland in 85. Ginger Alden there. We've already seen that. So maybe not. Let's see what else we got here. Some of the, this is to certify that Kathy Westmoreland is a member of the Elvis Presley Show vocalist, gold ID card. Me singing at the dedication of the Elvis Aaron Memorial Chapel in Tupelo, Mississippi. Oh, it's very sweet. You know, she had to have loved Elvis. Okay, all right, so that's some later pictures. It should have been awkward. With anyone else, it would have been. Instead, our reunion was as if there had never been an argument, as if our parting had only been a few hours instead of weeks. He wanted me to stay in his penthouse suite that night, and of course, I did. So we do get some more answers. They continued, and we know they slept together. They kept sleeping together because why would Elvis have her in there? Now, not that it matters. I mean, but I'm just saying that in general, there's a lot of curiosity, a lot of comments that I've seen, and questions I myself had. You know, after splitting up, breaking up, being asked to leave to go to her own room, then a couple cities later back in Elvis's bedroom. So on tour now. Let's continue. Forgotten were all the resolutions, the hours of agony and recriminations, the determination to get out of the hopeless situation I was in. Instead, there was only one thought of being with him again, sitting in bed, reading, exchanging ideas, and then there was always the lovemaking. Yeah, so there's the answer. The lovemaking that made me forget tomorrow's, yesterday's, and his marital status. It made me forget that a married man never shares holidays, the lonely times, the sad times, and the times of crisis. Elvis just wiped all the pain from my heart and mind with one touch, one smile, and one of his kisses that could make me forget that there was such a thing as the future. I just enjoyed the time I had with him and expected no more. So I guess she figured it out. She figured out that not to expect anything more. Her heart got broken, but then halfway healed, and then she could enjoy being with Elvis. Let me know what your thoughts are on this, because I mean, this one of those things where even the most loyal Elvis fans understand that it would be a burden in some ways, and also a joy to be in Kathy's position. Elvis called me up to his suite and fastened a gold necklace on my neck. It read TLC, which stood for Tender Love and Care, over a lightning bolt. And he had a clasp. He had 4 other original TLC necklaces made for the suites as well, because there were 4 suites that year. Later on, there were only 3 suites. The guys wore TCB necklaces, taking care of business, which also bore that lightning bolt. Elvis told me the story about the origin of the insignia. One stormy night at Graceland, he was standing in front of a mirror in a fit of hot anger, seeing nothing but ugliness. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning struck a marble statue in the meditation garden, leaving his nameplate shattered and broken in a jagged pattern resembling the lightning bolt and that had struck it. He interpreted it as a sign and a warning, as if God was putting him in his place. He ran back upstairs, looked in the mirror, and repeated to myself, "Remember who you are. Remember who you are." The lightning bolt insignia remained a symbol to remind him of his lesson. this is where we're going to end, folks. I really hope you've enjoyed reading Kathy and Elvis here, Elvis and Kathy, as well as the other books. I'm going to hopefully get some Child Bride in and some My Army Days with Elvis. But some of y'all were asking me, please read Elvis and Kathy today. And normally I do it every other day. But you know what? I do what I can to try to bring you guys Elvis Presley every day in many, many different ways. So hope you have a blessed day. I have a blessed day being at the beach with my family. We're going to go eat some food, go do some miniature golf and stuff like that, and have some dinner. And until next time, this is Rare Elvis Photos, TCB TLC to you. Elvis would give every one of you guys a TLC necklace if he could.